All right, everyone, thank you for being here for the third session with Sarah and the place we make. Sarah, I'm going to let you just dive in and then we'll have some time for questions at the end.
Okay, thanks, Charlotte. Let's share screen. There it is. Okay, so facing the future, how can we walk bravely in the direction we want to go? And I feel like this is the place that so often we want to jump to. The white question is, well, what should we do? Um, and I really want to note that it's important to go through the previous steps before we jump into the what can we do, because we have to understand the past, we have to understand where we're coming from, and we have to do the hard work of interrogating ourselves before we can begin to try to meaningfully do something. Um, and it's an ongoing, it's kind of a cycle. It's not like you finish examining the past and repenting, and then you're just straight on towards action. There's sort of a continual return, but it is important to get to the place where we feel like we're walking forward in a new way. So, overturning the legacy in the book, I kind of name 5 things that I felt like were um, legacies that had been handed to me from my past, from society, ancestors, whatever, and that I could identify in my present. And those 5 things that I name in the book are ignorance, just sort of a willful or not willful um, shielding myself from the truth. Greed, and that involved naming both the actual monetary gains that my family had gained from enslaving human beings and how that might have been passed down to me. And also looking at just in my own self, like where am I choosing to be selfish with my time and resources and money? Supremacy, how have I been taught that I'm literally better than other people? And how do I need to begin to unlearn that? Silence, where have I kind of been taught that it's not a good idea to speak about this stuff? Um, and then isolation, as we were talking in the last session, like the ways that I have been segregated from other people, and don't didn't have a lot of connections with people outside my own racial group. So those were the 5 things that I named and kind of tried to go through in the book. And then the 5 things that I identified as ways that I wanted to shift towards, from ignorance, not just to knowledge, but to empathy. So, not just knowing what happened, but being able to kind of imaginatively insert myself into other people's stories and imagine what it would be like to be another person. From greed, not simply to charity, which feels very kind of top down, like it still keeps me in the place of I have the power and the resources, but what does it mean to hold my hands in such a way that I recognize that what I have never really was mine at all, and just a different posture to sharing resources. From supremacy, trying to get to a place not of shame, but of shalom. So, what does it look like to be sort of like right-sized with the world? Um, and then from silence, not just speech, but self-disclosure. So entering this conversation from a position of trying to be as humble and as confessional as possible. And then from isolation, how do I get to community? So those were the 5 things that I identified as places that I wanted to go. And the book is really an attempt to describe the beginning of the journey from those 5 to these 5. But it's very much still a work in progress. Um, and I know we've been talking a lot about writing, and we haven't necessarily been coming at this from the perspective of like, you all are going to go out and act in these ways. But if you choose to take some kind of action towards racial justice, these are just some thoughts that you might consider. Surge.org, showing, I never remember if it's standing up or showing up for racial justice. Their whole goal is to organize white people for racial justice, and they have local chapters all over the place, and I recommend connecting if you're interested in learning more. Giving and spending, just looking at how we're using our resources. Conversation, talking about the ways we're in process, whether that's with people in your church, your family, or yeah. Speaking of conversation, if you would like to organize a book club around the place we make in your church or school or other organization, I would love to show up and talk to you further about that. And then local creative actions. Given the specific local history of the places that we find ourselves, how can we together write the next chapter of the story? And one story that it's not in the book because I didn't know about it until after the book came out, but I love this story because it shows how, like, it's really all about small groups of people doing local things. I feel like when we look at this issue, it can feel so big and overwhelming. Like, how do I fix 500 years of white supremacy around the globe? But if we look at what is the specific history in our local context? So there's a little small town on the Oregon coast called Waldport. It's a total drive-through town. Like, it's not a destination. You don't choose to go there. If you were to, like, say to your family, let's go visit the Oregon coast, you would not choose to go to Waldport. But they had a street in their town called Darky Creek Road. And they decided to investigate, like, why is this road called this? And what can we do about it? And they found that it was named after a Black man who had lived there 100 years ago. And they decided to change the name of the road and to commission a statue in his honor. This man's name was Lewis Southworth. So now when you go to Waldport, which is, again, like just this small kind of podunk little town, but they have this statue of Lewis Southworth in the middle of their town, and the road has been renamed. And I love that story because it's something so small and so tangible that only the people in that town could have done. Like, everybody else was just driving through the town. But if we ask ourselves, what are the specific ways that people have been harmed and excluded in our local places, then we will, be able to find ways to subvert those stories and write new endings. So I am going to read a little bit from the very end of the book. So the very end of the book, I talk about Taylor Stewart, who I mentioned earlier, who is working on different projects in Oregon around racial justice. And one of the things that I get to by the end of the book is finding out that Jacob Vanderpool's, the land where he lived and worked, is in a location that has now been bought back by the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, who were on that land before white people came. So there's kind of this cool full circle thing that's happening where the tribe has repurchased that land, and I was able to help connect these different African American groups with the tribe, and I got to be in the Zoom call where they were talking to each other about, like, hey, would you be willing to put a memorial to Jacob Vanderpool when you redevelop this property? And so that's where this part of the story kicks in. The culmination of these projects is probably still years away. The land where Vanderpool's business once stood now belongs to the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde, and they have their own stories to tell. There will be years of demolition and environmental cleanup and construction of something new. Taylor's other goals, abolishing the death penalty, creating a museum, recruiting people of color to live in Oregon, will take time and money and collaboration and hard work. I recognize that I too am still at the beginning of my own journey. I am still learning to think again about my own white supremacy, still awkwardly working out how to step into the process of repair and redemption, still learning to forge connections with my larger community, still making mistakes and having to relearn the movement of repentance all over again. But I have this hope. Someday, Black Oregonians like Taylor Stewart and Zachary Stocks will stand together with the descendants of the Clackamas tribe and with the descendants of Oregon's early white pioneers. All will stand together within reach of the spray from the falls of the Willamette. Together, we will unveil a memorial, a testament to the pain and tragedy the site has seen, an imperfect reckoning for the incalculable losses of the tribe and the injustice done to Jacob Vanderpool and those like him, an acknowledgement of what the city's white residents lost as well when they banished all others from their midst, a nod to the future, to the kind of place we want to create next, a place where all can become together the beloved community. Jacob Vanderpool's story is not over. Neither is mine. Neither is Oregon City's. A new chapter for all of us is just getting started. And one of the things I love the most about Taylor Stewart and the work that he's doing is he's going around to different communities in Oregon and helping them to investigate their past and create memorials and work towards a different kind of future. He's always saying that every story is not over. Like, we have the chance to write a new ending to the past. So yes, there is a ton of tragic and horrible history, but we can write a new chapter to these stories. Every story has more to write. And I think that's exciting and hopeful. So that is where I will leave it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
Maria, do you have a question you'd like to ask?
Do and it has more to do with the reception of the book and your message. But I'm wondering what you're encountering as you share the book and you share your story, particularly this idea that you bring out about repenting not just for our own personal racism and white supremacy, but for the sins of the ancestors.
What I will say is I wish that the people who would be upset by that idea would read the book. I haven't encountered a whole bunch of pushback because I think that people who don't like that idea just haven't engaged with the book yet at all. I hope that someday it gets into those hands. I will say one of my most proudest, one of the things I'm most proud of is that, so I have a friend who lives, she's a pastor in Eastern Oregon, which is very, it's rural, it's conservative. She gathered some people to read the book and have a book club, and they went through it for 12 weeks. They did a chapter a week, and then she invited me to Zoom in to the group at the end. And there was a man who is, he's an older, white, rural Fox News watching guy. And he shared in the Zoom call that I was in that this book was one of the most important books that he's ever read, and that it caused him to realize that he shouldn't be getting all of his news from Fox News. And that is huge. Like, when I am tempted to despair because it's not selling as well as it, one might hope, or that people aren't engaging with it in the way that I might wish that they would. It's like one guy really took it to heart and is changing the way he navigates the world. So I hope that more of that continues. In my own church, we did a book group, and I don't know that the people who would have been upset by it came. So that's the question, like, how do you engage the people whose minds you want to change? But
Thank you, Maria. That's a great question.
Mm.
Does anyone else have any questions that they are happy to have recorded?
I have
Okay, Susan, you go, and then Lori Beth.
I was really touched before I even started reading the book to see that you were donating 90% of the proceeds to the different organizations. And I wonder if you could just tell that story, how you decided, and how you picked the number, and just kind of your process on that.
Yeah. I just knew that I couldn't keep the money. I mean, it's like the whole point of the book is how I've profited off of, slavery and repentance. It was just like, I didn't want to be that white person who profits off of this conversation. And so the math, I kind of went around and around with my editor about how to describe what I did, because I kept 10%, but 15% went to my agent. So I'm like, did I really give 90% away? And it was like, but if we had tried to, like, it just, I don't know. They ended up saying, their legal department got involved, and they were like, no, it's fine. Like, we can say it this way. And I'm still like, I don't know if I gave 90% away or not. But I kept 10%, my agent got 15%, and then there was 75%, and it just divided up nicely to give 15% to each of 5 organizations. So it was that's just how the numbers worked out. And then I wanted to choose organizations that kind of hit on different aspects of the story. So one of them is the Red Door Project is doing work with police forces, and they're using theater as a way to get cops to think about encounters with people of color in a new way. And it's just one of those, like, I don't know, it's just a creative, to me, it felt like a fresh way of addressing the problem of, like, that split second when the cop pulls the trigger. So because some of it is about policing, right? And Jacob Vanderpool getting arrested. And then Equal Justice Initiative is the group that is highlighted in the movie and the book Just Mercy. So just the kind of the wheels of justice. So much of the story is about the justice system. The Crete Collective supports Black churches. So that was kind of the faith piece. Why am I not remembering Oregon Black Pioneers. I mean, that was just Oregon. It's about an Oregon Black pioneer, and they helped me a lot. And then I wanted to bless the Native American community as well. So then that's just a local Native American group. So yeah, just kind of trying to, like, spread it around in a way that made sense to what the story was.
Thank you, Susan, for that question. And for your response, Sarah.
Mhm.
Lori Beth, what question do you have?
I wanted to know what kind of conversation this sparked with your children. I don't know how old your children are, but you said you have 4. So
Mhm.
sure
Mhm.
that, you're working, they know you're working on this. So
Mhm.
what did that look like integrating this work in with parenting? I have a 9-year-old.
Mhm. Yeah. So when I started, so there were 6 years in between. So like, how do I tell the story of, I started working on the book in 2020, but I also started working on researching Jacob Vanderpool as an essay for my MFA program in 2017. So, like, from the time that I first heard of Jacob Vanderpool to when the book came out, there were 6 years. So my kids are all teenagers now, but when we began, they were younger. And there is a story in the book. I'm going to see if I can find it just because it kind of gets at that. Oh, I might not be able to find it. Oh, here. Okay. So this is when we began the research. So I bundled up my 4 children, then ages 6, 8, 10, and 12, and we barreled down the interstate through the broad, fertile Willamette Valley that had attracted so many of those early pioneers. The librarian had to yell at my 2 youngest children for attempting to ride a rolling chair down a hallway filled with artifacts, and I had to send all 4 of them outside unattended to flip water bottles while I waited for the file to be pulled. But eventually I'd snapped a picture of every page of the Vanderpool file, rustled my kids up from where they'd moved on from water bottles to parkour, and plunked them down in the nearest Starbucks for a quick treat before we made our way north again. So, guys, I asked my children over zombie frappuccinos, was it right that Oregon didn't allow Black people to live here? They pulled the straws out of their mouths long enough to yell, "No!" in unison. And what should we do about it now? I asked them. But the straws had already been reinserted. 4 sets of wide eyes stared at me while 4 pairs of busy cheeks worked the icy sugar. I didn't know what the answer was either. My question hung in the air as we threw away our plastic cups and headed back out to the minivan. So definitely when I began, like, I wanted to have this conversation, but I wasn't totally sure how to have it. And then at the end, I talk a little bit about, where my kids are at now and kind of how that conversation has shifted in our family. Definitely just me working on this has opened this conversation up in interesting ways with my kids. And they have each kind of taken it in different ways according to their own personalities. My daughter is a freshman at college, and she is doing an urban leadership program where she's going to be working in inner city Chicago next fall, and really has a heart for, like, trying to solve problems that have been, compounded by a lot of our racial history. One of my children is yeah, I don't know where he's going to end up, but he also has kind of a soft heart for, like, the problems of the world and how do we solve them. He said the other day, he was like, I think I'm going to have to be a politician, but I don't even want to. It's like, how else am I going to solve the world? Fix the world. So who knows where he's going to end up. And then the other 2 are sort of like, they'll have the conversation, but they aren't sure yet how it's going to, impact their lives. But yeah, it's been a fascinating conversation to have.
Thank you, Lori Beth.
Mm.
And Sarah.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, do y'all have any questions that you don't want recorded? Like, do you see value in stopping the recording and talking for a little while? I mean, I'm afraid that it will say something I wish I could have captured. So why don't I stop it and start it again, and we can capture or not capture it. All right, this concludes our 3rd session. Sarah, thank you so much for being here. If you're watching this and you have not bought her book or read it, please buy it and read it. And I will say, if you like audiobooks, Sarah reads it and you do a beautiful job on the audiobook. It's beautiful.
That was a really fun process. I was really glad I had that opportunity.
I mean, so good. And it is interesting. I prefer audio. I don't listen to a lot of audiobooks typically, but I appreciate when the author is able to read it. It,
Mhm.
it really is fantastic. And thank you to the four of you for being here. I know several others signed up and are going to be watching the recordings. Thank you for signing up and watching the recordings. And again, if you want to get in touch with Sarah, just let me know and I'll put you in touch with her. If you want to lead a group, coordinate a group, I have copies of her books that I can donate in certain cases or sell at a discount, and can get more to donate or sell at a discount. Like, I believe in this book, I believe in Sarah's work, and I'm happy to do what I can to get people in the way of this book. So thank you, Sarah. This time has been so nourishing to me. And it's, it's helped me realize why I do the work I do. And so thank you for helping me remember that today, and to all of you for helping me remember the value of this work. Right.